and welcome back to my garden. I've had a modicum of success, but the problem is that's bought a second job. I also think my late planted Nigella are rather stunted in growth, and the fabulous plant I've been growing has turned out to be a weed. Now, if you're a novice gardener like me, or perhaps someone with more expertise, and you'd be willing to share your advice in the comments, why don't you consider subscribing to my channel? All you need to do is to tap the button marked subscribe, and next time you open a YouTube app on your phone, your tablet or your computer, one of my videos will be waiting for you. And the first job? My husband has been admiring my side of the garden, where each of my plants has its own space and I don't have any ground cover. This is his side of the garden, and he's feeling overwhelmed because all his ground cover has grown into each other and there's an attack of bindweed. And guess who he's volunteered to help out? And in fact, not so much help out as totally subcontract the work to. So this is my goal of the day, is to work through this bed, cleaning it out. But it does mean I have control and I can get rid of all those pesky geraniums, which I don't like. And this is what I'm faced with. Can you even see what plants are there? There's a little shrub there, which I momentarily can't remember the name of. A tiny burgundy coloured salvia. At the back, growing in a tub, is an acanthus. Oh, it's got a lovely flower spike, looking much better than mine. Garlic mustard. I was contemplating pulling that out, but apparently it's very good for butterflies, or the caterpillar of a particular butterfly, but it's choked with bindweed. And there's that geranium I don't like, just such an insipid flower. That's getting cut right back, and things are starting to fall into the flower, well, onto the lawn, hence this complicated bits of ironwork propping everything up and back into the flower bed. Euphorbia there, a very large variety. I'm just wondering whether it's time to cut off the flower heads and just be left with the bushy spikes. With buddleia, I should say at this point my husband gardens for wildlife, so where possible it's native species or plants that are known for their nectar loving qualities. And so it continues down to the patio. I think the tiny purple flower there is Albrecia. That's definitely coming out. Still got some allium, so I just want to create a bit of space around those. And can you see the other purple? That's the crane's bill geranium, which I do like. It's a taller variety. I need to make sure I don't accidentally pull that out. Lots of leafy foliage there. I think that's crocosmia. So I'm not going to be able to do all this in one day. I'm going to tackle about a 2-metre stretch. I'm secretly hoping if I can show some progress, as my husband might come and join me later and we can tackle a little bit more. I'm not sure whether you can see, that's the roof of my neighbour's house, and there's 3 mallard ducks lined up on the ridgeline. Quack, quack. Let's get started. So first of all, I'm laying out some tarpaulin on the grass just so I can contain the rubbish. I've got my secateurs to hand and I am cutting away at the base of my geraniums and then just pulling. At this stage, I'm not digging out the roots of the bindweed. I pretty much reckon that's something my husband can do on perhaps a daily or other day basis. And then I just pull the ground sheet, the tarpaulin, down along the flower beds so I can keep everything together, and then momentarily I'm worried that I've lost my secateurs, but they were hidden underneath the tarpaulin. So everything is nicely contained. It's just now a matter now of collecting the corners of the tarpaulin together so I can take it in one tidy load up to the compost heap. Then you can see, even though I've tried to corral all my rubbish together, there's still little bits of leaf on the lawn. So next job is to find the brush that we normally keep on our patio and to sweep the lawn. Do you do this too? Let me know in the comments. So first of all, before I can do that, I'm collecting together all the iron work, the struts and the little bits of decorative fencing that my husband had been used to prop everything up to keep it in the flower bed, rather than actually getting on and doing a bit of clearing and tidying up himself. And yes, I know it does look a bit weird that I'm brushing my lawn. I do know though that my husband, if he'd been doing this job, he would probably, number one, have not been doing it at 7:30 in the morning, and number two, he would have probably given the lawn a quick cut as a way of almost doing the vacuuming on the lawn, as if you were, cleaning your carpets in the house, and that way it just cuts the lawn and collects all the detritus, the leaves that have spilled out onto the lawn, and he collects that into his container for the grass clippings, and then my way or his way, it all ends up on the compost heap. Well, it's an hour later. Please tell me that you can see a difference. Ta-da! I've certainly created some messy space, but look, I have rediscovered the Solomon seal. The variegated foliage there, is that euonymus? And the pretty deep purple salvia is actually been planted in a pot. I can see the stems of my crocosmia. I decided to deadhead the euphorbia, so the bushy foliage looks nice and lush. And that whole patch of native geraniums is just a bunch of stalks now. And the yellowy foliage there with the pink flowers, that is something magic carpet. If you can remember what it is off the top of your head, do let me know in the comments. What is that called? I did remember it as I was weeding around it, and it's just disappeared from my brain. I can see a little bit of lemon balm, which makes great flower arranging foliage or herbal tea. And behind, I think that's another salvia, hot lips. And then what have we got here? Is that a philodendron? No, Philadelphus, with the flowers that are supposed to give lots of evening scent. It doesn't look very healthy, does it? I've just spotted some more bindweed. Ooh, lots more bindweed. Let's see if we can get in there and just pull at it, hoping to weaken it a little bit. Oh, the more you pull, the more you see. But at least now I'm hoping my husband, when he comes into the garden, might just do a little bit of spot weeding like I'm trying to do on my side of the garden. The golden privet at the back there. And then that's a shorter crocosmia, buddleia, some more geraniums. So everything is just looking a little bit less cluttered, perhaps more intentional, and just a tiny bit tidier. Remember I told you at the beginning of the video I'd had a gardening fail, and the plant that I had been nurturing, which I thought was my overwintered Physostegia, is actually a weed, and I've run it through Google Lens, and can you guess what it is? It's got a tiny pink flower. It's the Rose Bay willow herb. So that beautiful lush growth, which I thought was going to be multiple stems of a spiky white flower, is going to have to come out. It would have been just so beautiful if it was a proper flower. And look, it's started to do what I was hoping it was going to do, where the pieces of the plant which were resting on the soil have started to root. Wouldn't that have been so good? And the distinctive little pink flower is not open yet. It's too early in the morning. But there it is. Quite insignificant, but eventually it has lots of fluty seeds. My husband calls this old man's beard, but that's clematis. I think it's a childhood name he had for it. So another one for the compost heap. And another weed here. What's it going to be? I'm tempted to let it grow a little bit more. It's got quite tough leaves, which are hairy. A flower head coming through. We'll have to wait and see. But here, is this a dahlia? No, it's not a dahlia. This is my husband's. I think it's a Rebecca kind of flower. It's got that wild geranium in it. So I'm going to weed the flower pot so that that geranium doesn't seed all over the place. Again, it looks quite pretty, a little bit insignificant, but it just takes too much hold in the garden. And these are my Nigella seedlings. A bit of a thistle there. So my husband says I should just have picked out the weakest ones rather than trying to transplant them. I can't quite bear doing that. I planted these quite late in the season. Do you remember I showed you the back of the seed packet? And my husband said it was too late in the season. But why is that? Is it just that the growth will always be short and stubby? So I did notice at the back of the seed packet said to sow at intervals through the summer, a bit like you do with your salad crops. So you've got continual flowering. But just compare the height of these with the height of the cosmos next door, which my sister planted and tended in her greenhouse. So I think this must have been planted in the greenhouse in April, and my Nigella was planted direct. It must have been end of May, something like that. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I'm going to make a note in my Linda Vata garden journal to not buy dahlias again. They're really fashionable at the moment for weddings and photo shoots. There's the 4 plants that I bought this year, and I think the 3 plants I've tried to overwinter, they just haven't come to anything. I've just got one single flower. That's what I'll have to do for my dahlia fix, is buy a bunch of fresh cut flowers to enjoy indoors. Now, something my husband has spotted in my side of the garden are those purple cranesbill geranium. Do you remember I planted them underneath my bay? And that was because I realised that I had planted or had bought a dwarf variety of the geranium, and therefore it wasn't going to have the vase length that I needed, the length of the flower to put into my vase. So I've purposely put them in a really shaded place to encourage them to grow up and find the light. So when I do cut them, I'm getting a good 30 centimetres on them. In fact, my neighbour next door has got some beautiful cranesbill geraniums by his front door. So I'm going to work up the courage to ask him whether perhaps I could have a clump to put in my garden. And these are some of the cosmos that I planted at the end of the garden. And can you see just off to the left, the Nigella? So you can see what a difference a couple of months makes in terms of when you do sow your seeds. They're looking quite healthy, the cosmos, even though I was worried about them being under the shade of the tree. My zinnias, to the right is my hellebore, and the zinnias are to the middle and left of the screen. Slow progress there, but to tell you the truth, they could probably do with a really good watering. And as it's still early in the morning, I might do that now. I've read that if you water in the evening, the moist environment encourages the slugs to come and visit. And so far, although I've got some slug damage, it isn't too bad. I'm trying to make it a policy to water my garden more frequently, but I have to do it using watering cans as we don't have a hose. So another thing I'm trying to do is to make sure I water the far end of the garden first and work my way back to the outdoor tap, rather than starting at the bit closer to the house and then getting fed up that the bit at the end of the garden never really gets watered properly. And then a reward for all my hard work, I'm going to cut some flowers. Rather cannily doing this from my husband's side of the garden because I don't have much in my side of the garden yet. So this is ragwort, which is important in the life cycle of the cinnabar moth, and it has grown so tall I can just cut the side shoots and that will give me enough length to be able to display them in a vase. I'm also going to cut some of the white feverfew and some of the purple toadflax, which just seems to have arrived from nowhere. And then it was just a matter of a quick cut and plonk into a vase I'd picked up from a car boot sale. And I will say these flowers look much nicer in person. You seem a bit lost here. You can't see the beauty of the meadow style look. That's all from me for now, and I'll see you in the garden next time.